It was an ordinary morning in a small town school. The air was filled with the sound of laughter, footsteps, and chatter of children running down the corridor. Among them was a quiet girl named Lila. She wasn't the kind to speak much. Her eyes were always wandering, not out of distraction but curiosity. She noticed little things others didn't: the peeling paint on the walls, the way sunlight entered through broken windows, and most of all, the old piano sitting in the corner of the school auditorium. The piano was large, dusty, and covered with scratches. No one really used it anymore. Sometimes the music teacher played it for a few minutes before class, but most students just walked past it. To Lila, though, it was special. She didn't know why, but every time she passed it, something inside her stirred, like a whisper calling her closer. One day during recess, when the classroom was empty, Lila found herself standing near that piano again. Her friends had gone outside to play, but she stayed back, drawn to those black and white keys. Her hands trembled as she reached out and pressed one key gently. It made a dull sound, slightly out of tune, but it echoed softly in the quiet room. For a few seconds she stood frozen, surprised at how something so simple could make her heart beat faster. She pressed another key. And then another. She didn't know what she was doing, but she liked how it felt. For her, those random notes weren't mistakes. They were tiny sparks of something she couldn't explain. Just then, a group of students entered the room. They saw her sitting at the piano and burst into laughter. "Hey, look! Lila's trying to play the piano!" one of them shouted. Another added, "She doesn't even know how to touch the keys properly." Their laughter echoed louder than the piano ever could. Lila froze again, but this time it wasn't out of wonder. It was fear. Her hands dropped to her lap. Her face turned red as she stared at the floor, wishing she could disappear. One of the boys even walked closer and pressed a few random keys, making a terrible noise. "There. That's your song, Lila," he joked, and everyone laughed again. She didn't say a word. She quietly got up, picked up her bag, and walked out of the auditorium. But as she stepped into the hallway, she heard one last comment, a girl's voice saying, "She just wants attention. Nobody like her can play the piano." Those words stayed with her the entire day. They followed her home, echoed in her mind, and wouldn't go away. She didn't cry in front of anyone, but when she was alone that night, she sat by her window and whispered softly to herself, "Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm not meant for it." But even as she said it, her eyes kept imagining the piano keys. She could still hear the faint sound of that first note she had touched. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. The next day at school, she avoided the auditorium. She didn't want to pass by that piano again. She focused on her classes, copied notes quietly, and kept to herself. But somehow, by the end of the week, she found herself walking near that same hall again. The big brown doors were slightly open. Sunlight fell on the old piano, making the dust particles sparkle like tiny stars. Lila stood there for a moment, watching it from afar. No one was around. The laughter from that day came back to her mind, but this time she didn't turn away. She took a deep breath and walked inside. Her fingers hovered above the keys again. "Just one note," she whispered to herself. She pressed a single key, soft, low, and trembling, then another. This time she didn't stop. Slowly she began pressing a few more, trying to make a tune she'd heard somewhere on TV. It didn't sound right, but she didn't care. For those few minutes she felt calm, like the world had forgotten her and she had forgotten the world. But soon she heard footsteps. Panicking, she quickly grabbed her bag and ran out before anyone could see her. Her heart raced. Not from fear this time, but excitement. That night, when she reached home, she couldn't stop thinking about it. Her small room had no instruments, no posters, no fancy gadgets. But she sat on her bed and used her fingers to mimic the piano keys in the air. Her mother noticed her doing that. "You've been quiet lately," her mother said gently. "Something on your mind?" Lila hesitated for a moment and then smiled shyly. "There's a piano at school. I like how it sounds," her mother smiled back, though she knew they couldn't afford music lessons or instruments. "That's beautiful," she said softly. "Music is a gift. If you love it, don't let anyone stop you." Those words were simple, but they sank deep into Lila's heart. That night she went to sleep thinking about the piano again, and for the first time she didn't feel embarrassed about it. Days passed and her curiosity grew stronger. She started going to the auditorium almost every evening after classes ended. Sometimes the janitor saw her but didn't say anything. She wasn't causing trouble, just quietly playing. At first, her fingers made clumsy sounds. She didn't know what chords were or what rhythm meant. But she listened carefully. She remembered the sounds of the keys and tried to repeat them the next day. She started recognizing patterns in which keys sounded good together, which didn't. Little by little, her fingers began to move with confidence. It wasn't perfect, but something magical was happening. Without a teacher, without anyone's help, she was learning. Sometimes she'd record piano music from the internet on her mother's old phone and replay it again and again. She'd hum the tune until she could remember it by heart, then go to school and try to play it. It became her little secret world, a world that belonged only to her. But one day, that secret was discovered. The music teacher entered the auditorium unexpectedly and saw her playing. Lila jumped in surprise, ready to be scolded, but the teacher smiled instead. "You've been practicing, haven't you?" he asked kindly. Lila nodded nervously. He came closer and pressed a few keys. "You have a good ear," he said. "You can hear the notes right." That's rare. It was the first time someone had ever complimented her for playing. She couldn't stop smiling all day after that. But the next morning, word spread again. Some students had seen her practicing. They started teasing her once more. "Still playing that old thing? You think you'll be a musician now?" This time, though, she didn't run away. She just looked at them, smiled quietly, and walked off. Inside, she felt something had changed. Their laughter didn't sting the same way anymore. When she went home that evening, she told her mother everything. The teasing, the teacher's kind words, the little progress she had made. Her mother listened, and later that week, she surprised Lila with a used keyboard she'd bought from a second-hand store. It was small, old, and a few keys didn't even work properly. But to Lila, it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. She hugged her mother tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. From that night on, she practiced for hours. Even when her fingers hurt, she didn't stop. Every wrong note became a lesson. Every small improvement became motivation. The same girl who was once mocked for touching the piano now sat in her tiny room, playing soft tunes late into the night, not for applause, not for fame, but for herself. And though no one else knew it yet, a quiet change had begun. It was the start of something extraordinary, something that one day would make everyone who laughed at her fall silent in awe. Days turned into weeks, and Lila's love for the piano kept growing stronger. The small keyboard her mother had given her became her world. Every morning before school, she touched the keys gently, trying to create small melodies. At night, she practiced again, even when her fingers felt sore. The sounds were not perfect, but to her they were beautiful. Her room was always quiet except for the soft clicking of piano keys. Sometimes the neighbors could hear faint tunes coming through the window. Some ignored it, but others smiled, saying, "That girl really loves her music." Her mother often sat on the edge of the bed, watching her. She didn't understand much about music, but she saw the glow in Lila's eyes. "You really love this, don't you?" she would say softly. Lila would nod and smile shyly. In school, she was still the quiet one. The same students who had laughed at her before continued their jokes, but something had changed. She no longer let their words stay in her heart. She knew what they didn't, that every night while they slept, she was building something beautiful. Sometimes she still practiced on the old piano in the school auditorium. She would wait until everyone left, then sneak in quietly. The sound of her music echoed softly through the empty hall. She often imagined that the piano itself was happy someone was finally playing it again. One evening, while she was practicing alone, the janitor came in. He was a kind old man who had seen many students come and go. "You really like that piano, don't you?" he said, smiling. "Yes," Lila replied softly. "It sounds broken, but I still like it," he chuckled. "Maybe it's waiting for someone like you to bring it back to life." That sentence stayed in her mind long after he left. It made her feel proud, as if she had been chosen to care for something forgotten. Over the next few months, Lila's music improved. She learned to play small songs she found online. She didn't know how to read notes yet, so she watched people's fingers on the screen and tried to copy their movements. It was slow and frustrating at first, but she never gave up. When she played something correctly, her heart filled with joy. She would look up at her mother and say, "Listen, this time I got it right." And her mother would clap proudly, even if the tune was simple. But life wasn't easy. Their house was small, and money was always tight. Some days her mother worked late and dinner was just tea and bread. Still, no matter how tired they were, her mother would always ask, "Did you play today?" "Yes, I did," Lila would answer, smiling. "It makes me feel better." Music became her comfort, her escape, her dream. Then one afternoon, something happened that changed everything. The school principal announced the annual talent show. It was the biggest event of the year. Students could perform anything, singing, dancing, acting, or playing instruments. Everyone started preparing. Groups formed, laughter filled the hallways, and excitement was in the air. Lila watched quietly, unsure if she should join. Deep inside, she wanted to perform. She wanted people to hear her play, but the memory of laughter from before still haunted her. That night, she told her mother about the show. "I want to play, but what if they laugh again?" she asked softly. Her mother put down her cup and looked at her gently. "They laughed because they didn't understand," she said. "But you've grown. You've worked hard. Don't hide your talent because of their laughter. Let your music speak for you." Those words gave Lila courage. The next morning, she went to school early and signed her name on the registration sheet. When she saw her name there, her heart beat fast, not from fear but from excitement. Over the next few weeks, she practiced harder than ever. She chose a song she had created herself, a tune she called "The Light Inside." It wasn't a famous piece, but it was full of emotion. It told her story, the pain of being laughed at, the loneliness, and the hope she had found through music. Every evening she played that song again and again. Her mother would listen quietly, sometimes wiping tears from her eyes. "It sounds like your heart," she once said, but not everyone was kind. When some classmates heard she was joining the show, the teasing began again. "She'll make everyone sleep with her boring piano sounds," one said. Another laughed. "Better bring earplugs." Lila tried not to let it bother her, but deep down it hurt. There were moments when she thought of quitting. One night she even stopped playing halfway and whispered, "Maybe I shouldn't do it." Her mother came and sat beside her. "When they laugh, it means they see something in you that they don't understand yet. One day they won't laugh, they'll listen. You'll see." Those words became her strength. The next morning, she got up early and went to the auditorium before anyone else. She placed her fingers on the piano and whispered, "I'll prove them wrong." As the days passed, she noticed small improvements. Her fingers moved faster, her rhythm was smoother, and her heart felt more connected to each note. The janitor sometimes stopped by and said, "That sounds better every day." His kind words made her smile. On the last week before the talent show, she stayed after school almost every evening. Sometimes it was dark by the time she went home, but she didn't care. The auditorium had become her second home. She practiced until her hands ached, but she didn't stop. She could hear her mistakes and worked on them patiently. She wanted her music to be perfect, not for the judges, but for herself. One evening, the music teacher came again and listened from the back of the room. When Lila finished, he clapped quietly and said, "You've grown a lot. That piece is beautiful. Are you going to play it at the show?" "Yes," she said, smiling nervously. "Then remember," he told her, "when you're on that stage, don't think about the audience. Just think about the music, so let it tell your story." Those words stayed with her. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay awake thinking about the upcoming show, the bright lights, the crowd, and the sound of the piano under her hands. She felt both scared and excited. Her mother noticed her awake and came to her bed. "Can't sleep?" "I'm nervous," Lila whispered. Her mother smiled softly. "Being nervous means it's important to you. Just play from your heart and everything will be fine." The next day, Lila walked through the school halls with quiet confidence. The same people who used to laugh at her now watched her curiously. She didn't mind. She knew something they didn't, how much work she had done, how much love she had poured into her music. After classes, she stayed back again to practice one last time. The empty auditorium felt peaceful. As she played her song, she imagined what it would be like on the big day. She could already see herself sitting under the bright lights, her hands moving freely across the keys, the melody filling the air. When she finished, she smiled to herself. For the first time, she believed, really believed, that she could do it. She packed her things and was about to leave when she saw her reflection in the piano's glossy surface. For a moment, she didn't see the shy, quiet girl anymore. She saw someone strong, someone who had turned pain into passion. That night, as she walked home with the sunset painting the sky orange, she felt proud. She knew the next part of her journey would be hard, but she was ready. The laughter from before no longer hurt her, because now she had something stronger than their words. She had her music, and deep inside she made herself a promise. No matter what happens on that stage, I won't stop playing. The day of the talent show was getting closer, and the entire school was buzzing with excitement. Everywhere Lila went, she could hear students talking about their acts. Who was dancing, who was singing, who was performing magic tricks. Posters were pinned on walls, the stage was being decorated with lights, and rehearsals filled the auditorium every afternoon. Lila felt both excited and nervous. Her name was printed on the list too, right next to piano performance. Seeing it written there made her heart skip a beat. She had dreamed about this moment for so long, but now that it was actually happening, fear crept in. What if she made a mistake? What if the audience laughed again? What if her hands froze on stage? That night she sat quietly beside her mother at the dinner table. Her food was untouched. Her mother noticed right away. "What's wrong?" she asked gently. "I keep thinking about the show," Lila said softly. "What if I forget my song?" Her mother smiled. "You won't forget it. It's a part of you now. You've played it so many times that it's in your heart." Lila smiled a little. Her mother's words always made things seem easier. But deep down she still felt nervous. The next few days went by quickly. Every free moment she practiced. She practiced at home, in school, even during short breaks. She didn't care if people whispered about her anymore. She wanted to give her best. One afternoon during her last rehearsal before the show, she sat in front of the old school piano and closed her eyes. She took a deep breath and began to play. Her fingers moved gently at first, then with growing confidence. The melody filled the room, calm, emotional, and pure. When she finished, the music teacher who had been listening clapped softly. "That's it," he said. "Don't change a thing. Just play it exactly like that." Lila smiled shyly. "I'll try." "No," he said with a kind smile. "Don't try. Just feel it. The audience will feel what you feel." Those words stayed in her heart. The morning of the show arrived. The entire school was decorated with colorful ribbons and banners. Students wore their best clothes. Teachers were busy arranging seats, and the big stage shone under bright yellow lights. The excitement in the air was so strong that Lila could feel it in her chest. She sat backstage holding her small keyboard bag. Even though she would play on the school piano, she had brought her keyboard for comfort. It felt like a piece of home. Her hands were slightly cold, and she kept rubbing them together to stay calm. From behind the curtain, she could hear the noise of the crowd. Laughter, cheering, clapping. The show had already started. Dancers twirled across the stage, singers hit high notes, and students shouted in excitement. The host kept calling out names one by one. Lila watched quietly as each performer went up, feeling both happy and scared. She wanted to do well, but her stomach was in knots. She could hear her heartbeat in her ears. Then she heard it. "Next we have Lila performing on the piano." Her breath caught for a second. It was her turn. The teacher smiled at her and whispered, "Go on. You'll do great." She stood up slowly, wiped her hands on her dress, and walked towards the stage. Her heart was racing, her knees felt weak, but she kept moving. The lights hit her face as she stepped onto the stage. The auditorium looked much bigger from up there. Rows of students, teachers, and parents filled the seats. She could even see a few faces from the group who once laughed at her. For a brief moment, fear tried to return. The memory of their laughter flashed in her mind. But then she took a deep breath and remembered her mother's words. "Let your music speak for you." She sat down on the piano bench, straightened her back, and looked at the keys. The microphone picked up every small sound, and the audience went silent. Her fingers touched the first key. A soft note filled the air. Then another. Then another. The melody began, slow, emotional, gentle like a whisper. As she played, she forgot about everything around her. She didn't see the crowd, the lights, or the judges. All she could feel was the music flowing through her. Each note carried a piece of her story. The pain of being laughed at, the long hours of practice, the moments of doubt, and the love she had for the piano. The hall stayed completely silent. Even the students who used to mock her sat still, their eyes fixed on her moving hands. The sound of the piano filled every corner of the room. It was like the instrument itself was alive again. singing through her fingers. As the music reached its highest point, her heart felt light. The fear was gone. She was free, just her and the piano, sharing a moment that no one could take away. And then came the final note, soft, steady, and full of emotion. She let her fingers rest, lifted her head, and looked at the crowd. For a few seconds there was silence, and then applause, loud, thunderous applause that filled the hall. People stood up, clapping and cheering. The sound was overwhelming. Her eyes widened in disbelief. The same people who had once laughed at her were now cheering for her. Some even shouted her name. Lila smiled, a real, bright smile. She felt warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't just happiness. It was pride, relief, and a quiet sense of victory. Her teacher gave her a thumbs up from the side of the stage. The principal smiled and nodded proudly. Even a few of her classmates looked surprised, almost embarrassed for how they had treated her before. She stood, bowed slightly, and walked off the stage. Her legs were shaking, but her heart felt light. When she reached backstage, her mother was waiting near the door, tears in her eyes. "You did it," her mother whispered, hugging her tightly. "You did it, my girl." Lila hugged her back, unable to speak. She didn't need words. The moment said it all. After the show, people came up to her, praising her performance. "You were amazing. That song was beautiful. I didn't know you could play like that." She smiled politely and thanked them. Inside, she felt something deeper, forgiveness. She didn't hate anyone for laughing at her before. Maybe, she thought, they just didn't understand how much effort and love went into learning something new. When the results were announced, she didn't even care about winning anymore. But when the principal called her name for best solo performance, her eyes filled with tears. She walked up, took the small golden trophy in her hands, and felt her heart swell with gratitude. That night, she placed the trophy on the small table beside her bed. She looked at it for a long time before turning off the light. It wasn't just a piece of metal. It was proof of everything she had gone through. Before going to sleep, she whispered softly, "Thank you, piano." The next morning, when she entered school, everything felt different. People greeted her, smiled at her. Some even asked her to teach them a few notes. The laughter was gone, replaced with respect, but even with all the attention, she stayed humble. She still sat in the same spot in class, still smiled quietly, and still went to the auditorium after school to play. The old piano wasn't dusty anymore. The janitor had cleaned it, saying, "This piano's got life again, thanks to you." Lila laughed softly and said, "It gave life to me too." From that day on, every time she touched the piano keys, she remembered how far she had come. From the girl everyone mocked to the girl who made the whole school listen. And in that moment, she understood something important. People's laughter fades, but true passion never does. Her journey was far from over. But now she had something no one could take away: belief in herself. The talent show had ended, but for Lila, something new had just begun. The next morning, when she walked into school, she could feel that everything was different. The same halls that once echoed with laughter and teasing now carried whispers of admiration. Students who used to ignore her were now smiling and waving. "Hey, you played really well yesterday," one of them said. "I didn't know you were that good," another added. Lila smiled politely, feeling both happy and shy. It all felt strange, in a good way. For so long she had been invisible, the quiet girl who sat in the back, but now everyone seemed to notice her. When she entered the classroom, even her teacher greeted her warmly. "Well done, Lila," she said with a proud smile. "You reminded everyone what real talent looks like." Lila thanked her quietly and took her seat. She could still feel her heart light with joy. All the pain, the mocking, the embarrassment. It suddenly felt worth it. At lunch, some of the same classmates who once laughed at her asked if she could play for them again. She laughed softly. "Not today," she said, "but maybe sometime soon." Deep inside, she wasn't angry with them anymore. She understood that sometimes people make fun of what they don't understand. But now they did. Her music had spoken for her. After school, she walked to the auditorium like she always did. The sunlight filtered through the tall windows, casting a warm glow on the piano. The janitor was cleaning nearby and smiled when he saw her. "Star of the show, huh?" he teased kindly. Lila laughed. "It still feels unreal." "Well," he said, leaning on his broom, "you earned it." You brought this old piano back to life. It hasn't sounded this good in years. Lila ran her hand gently over the piano keys. It brought me back to life too, she whispered. She sat down and began to play softly, not her competition song this time, but something new. A tune she was making up right there, full of warmth and hope. The music floated through the empty room like sunlight after rain. That night at home, her mother hugged her tightly again. "I'm proud of you," she said. "You did something beautiful." Lila smiled. "It's only the beginning, Mama. I want to learn more. I want to play better." Her mother nodded. "Then we'll find a way." Over the next few weeks, Lila became more confident. She started helping the music teacher during class, showing younger students how to press the right keys and feel the rhythm. Her teacher was amazed at how naturally she explained things. "You'd make a good music coach one day," he told her. She blushed. "I just want to share what I love." The school began inviting her to perform at small events, morning assemblies, cultural days, and even visitors' meetings. Each time she played, people listened quietly, some even closing their eyes as her notes filled the room. But despite all the attention, Lila never forgot where she had started, alone, afraid, and mocked. Sometimes when she saw a new student sitting quietly in the corner, she would smile at them or ask if they wanted to learn music. She didn't want anyone else to feel like she once did. One rainy afternoon, she was sitting by the piano when one of the girls who used to tease her walked in. The girl looked nervous, holding a notebook in her hand. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" she asked softly. Lila nodded. "Of course, I just wanted to say sorry," the girl said. "I was mean to you before." "I shouldn't have laughed at you." Lila smiled gently. "It's okay," she said. "People change." "I'm glad you came to talk." The girl looked relieved. "Your music was really beautiful. It made me cry, actually." Lila's eyes softened. "Thank you. That means a lot." From that day, that same girl began coming to the music room during breaks. Lila started teaching her small tunes, showing her how to use both hands together. Slowly, others joined too. Within weeks, there were 5 or 6 students gathering around the piano every afternoon, laughing and learning together. The old dusty instrument that once stood forgotten now became the heart of the school. One day, the principal visited during one of these sessions. He watched for a while and said, "You've turned this into something special, Lila. Would you like to start a piano club?" Her eyes lit up. "Really? That would be amazing." "Then it's settled," he said with a smile. "You'll be the first student leader of our new music club." Lila could hardly believe it. From being the shy girl who was laughed at for touching the piano to now leading a music club, it felt like a dream. Every Friday after school, the club met in the auditorium. Students practiced songs, shared ideas, and encouraged each other. Lila didn't act like a teacher. She was a friend, helping others find the same joy she had found. One afternoon, her music teacher came to her and said, "There's a community concert next month. Schools from all over town will perform. Would you like to represent our school?" Lila's mouth fell open. "Me?" "Yes, you," he said proudly. "You've earned it." At first, she hesitated. The idea of playing in front of strangers was scary. But then she remembered how scared she had been before the talent show, and how wonderful it had felt afterward. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll do it." The next few weeks were full of practice. This time she wanted to play something new, something that showed not just skill but heart. She composed a piece that told her whole journey, from fear to courage, from loneliness to love. Her mother often sat nearby, listening with pride in her eyes. "Every time you play," she said softly, "it feels like you're telling a story without words." Lila smiled. "That's what music is for me. It's how I talk to the world." When the day of the community concert arrived, Lila was ready. The stage was bigger, the crowd larger, and the lights brighter than ever before. She felt nervous again, but it was a good kind of nervous, the kind that means you care deeply about what you're doing. As she waited backstage, she remembered her first time touching a piano key, the laughter, the tears, the long nights of practice. Every memory came back, not as pain, but as strength. When her name was called, she stepped onto the stage with quiet confidence. The lights shone on her face and the audience waited. She took a deep breath and began to play, the hall filled with music that seemed to come straight from her soul. The melody rose and fell like waves, full of emotion and life. The audience sat still, listening with open hearts. Some smiled, some wiped their eyes. When the final note faded, there was a brief silence, and then, once again, thunderous applause. Her teacher was clapping, her mother was clapping, and even strangers were standing to cheer for her. It felt unreal, but this time she didn't cry. She just smiled, a calm, grateful smile. After the performance, a woman from another school approached her. "That was beautiful," she said. "Do you take lessons somewhere?" Lila shook her head. "No, ma'am. I learned on my own." The woman looked amazed. "Then keep going. You have something very special." When they returned home that night, her mother hugged her and said, "See what happens when you don't give up?" Lila nodded. "I used to think people's laughter would stop me. But now I know it only made me stronger." As weeks passed, her name began to spread beyond her school. People started calling her the girl with the golden hands. She was invited to perform at local events and community gatherings, but no matter how much attention she got, she always stayed humble. She still helped other students, still practiced on the same old piano, and still said thank you every time someone praised her. Sometimes she would sit alone in the auditorium after everyone had gone home, her hands resting on the keys. She would close her eyes and whisper, "Thank you, music, for finding me." The laughter from long ago had vanished. Now only melodies filled her world, melodies born from courage, patience, and love. And as she played, she knew her journey was far from over. She had found her place, not just on a stage, but in the hearts of everyone who listened. Her music had turned pain into beauty, fear into strength, and loneliness into connection. And though she didn't say it out loud, she knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning of something far greater. Time passed quickly. The seasons changed, and so did Lila's life. The small-town girl who once sat quietly at the back of the class was now known across schools in her district. People often spoke about her story, how she had taught herself to play, how she turned laughter into applause. Her name was now connected with something beautiful, music. But Lila didn't let fame or praise change her. She was still the same, calm, humble, and full of gratitude. Every morning she walked to school with her old bag and a gentle smile. She still sat by the same piano after classes, just as she used to when no one noticed her. The only difference was now the piano was never lonely. Students often joined her to practice, ask for help, or just sit and listen. Her music club had grown larger than she ever imagined. Every Friday, the auditorium came alive with sounds of laughter and tunes from instruments. Some students played guitar, some sang, some learned piano from her. What once was an empty, dusty room had now become a place full of joy. One day, as she was teaching a new student how to play simple chords, the school principal walked in with a big smile.
"Lila," he said, "I have some news for you." She looked up, curious. "You've been invited to represent our school at the Regional Youth Arts Festival next month," he said proudly.
"It's a big event. There will be professional judges, musicians, and even media coverage." For a moment, Lila couldn't speak. The thought of performing in front of such a large audience made her heart race. "Me, are you sure?" she asked softly. The principal nodded. "No one deserves it more. You've inspired everyone here." That evening, when she told her mother the news, her mother's eyes filled with tears. "I told you, my child," she whispered. "Your music would take you far." The following weeks were filled with preparation. Lila practiced longer than ever before. She chose to perform a new piece she had composed herself, a song that captured everything she had lived through. It began with soft, hesitant notes representing her fear and loneliness, then slowly rose into a bright, powerful melody full of strength and hope. She named it Wings of Light. Every night as she practiced, her mother sat nearby, sometimes sewing clothes, sometimes just listening quietly. "You've come so far," she said one evening. Lila smiled. "I couldn't have done it without you." When the day of the festival arrived, the auditorium was grander than anything she had ever seen. Huge lights hung above the stage and hundreds of people filled the seats. Musicians tuned their instruments, the audience chatted excitedly, and the atmosphere was full of energy. Backstage, Lila took slow, deep breaths. She could hear her heartbeat in her ears. It reminded her of the very first time she had played in her school talent show. The fear, the excitement, the hope. She looked down at her hands, the same hands that once trembled on the piano keys, and smiled. "We've come a long way," she whispered to herself. When her name was announced, the audience clapped politely. She walked up to the piano, her steps calm and steady. The bright light shone on her face, but this time she didn't feel small. She sat down, placed her fingers on the keys, and closed her eyes. The first notes of Wings of Light filled the hall, soft, tender, full of emotion. Each note carried a story. The melody began to rise and swell like a heart slowly finding its courage. The audience grew silent. Every sound, every pause, every chord told them something real. As she reached the middle of the piece, her fingers moved faster, stronger. The music filled the room like a warm wave, wrapping around everyone's hearts. People could feel her journey, her pain, her patience, her victory. When the final note faded, the silence that followed felt sacred. And then applause. Long, loud, heartfelt applause. Some stood, some cheered, and a few even wiped their eyes. Lila bowed with a shy smile. Inside, her heart was glowing. She wasn't just happy, she was thankful. After the performance, one of the judges, a well-known pianist, came up to her backstage. "That was extraordinary," he said warmly. "Do you take professional lessons?" Lila shook her head. "No, sir. I learned on my own," he looked amazed. "Then you have a gift, a rare one. If you ever want to train further, I'll be happy to help." She couldn't believe it. The world that once laughed at her was now opening doors she never imagined. When she went home that night, she sat on her bed holding the certificate she had received from the festival. It wasn't just paper to her. It was a memory of every tear, every late night, every dream she had ever dared to believe in. The next day, when she entered school, she was greeted with cheers. Her friends from the music club had made a small banner that said, "We're proud of you, Lila." She laughed and thanked everyone. The music teacher smiled and said, "You didn't just make us proud. You showed everyone that hard work and heart can create magic." From then on, her journey grew even brighter. She was invited to teach younger students at the community center. Children from nearby schools came to learn from her. She didn't charge anyone. She only asked them to promise one thing: never stop believing in what you love. She spent hours teaching, guiding, and encouraging them. She knew what it felt like to be laughed at, to feel small, to doubt yourself. So she made sure no one who came to her ever felt that way. Years passed and Lila finished school. She got a scholarship to study music formally, something she had once thought impossible. Her mother cried tears of joy when she received the letter. Before leaving for college, she visited the old school one last time. The auditorium was quiet, sunlight falling softly on the piano that had started it all. She walked up to it and touched the keys gently. A familiar warmth filled her heart. She sat down and played the first tune she had ever learned, the same clumsy, uneven melody that had once made everyone laugh. But this time it sounded different, richer, full of life. The janitor, now older but still kind, walked in and smiled. "Still playing, huh?" She laughed softly. "Always," he nodded. "You know, when you first touched this piano, I knew it was special. Not because of the sound, but because of you." Lila looked at the instrument, her eyes shining. "This piano gave me a home when I didn't have one in people's hearts," she said quietly. A few years later, Lila returned, not as a student, but as a guest. The school had invited her to be the chief guest for their new music competition. As she walked through the same corridors, memories flooded back, the teasing, the loneliness, the small victories. She saw a little girl standing near the stage, nervously clutching her sheet of music. Lila walked up to her and smiled. "Are you performing?" The girl nodded nervously. "I'm scared. What if they laugh at me?" Lila knelt down and said gently, "I used to be scared too. But you know what I learned? People may laugh, but they always stop when they see something true. Just play with your heart and the music will protect you." The girl smiled shyly and said, "Okay, I'll try." Later, as Lila sat in the audience, she watched that same girl perform. The tune was simple, but the heart behind it was pure. When the girl finished, the audience clapped loudly, and Lila's eyes filled with tears. It felt like life had come full circle. That night, as she walked home under the starlit sky, she thought about her journey, how it had begun with fear and ended with love. She realized that her music wasn't just about sounds or notes. It was about connection, about touching hearts and showing others that even the quietest dream can grow into something beautiful. And so, Lila kept playing. She kept teaching. She kept inspiring. Her story spread far beyond her town, not as a tale of fame, but as a story of faith, courage, and kindness, because once upon a time, a little girl was laughed at for touching a piano, but now, her music had made the world listen, and no one would ever forget her song.